Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jess, Elmquist, and welcome to our first CHRO webinar of 2023. I'm your host, Jess Elmquist, CHRO and Chief Evangelist from Phenom, and we are so excited to welcome Rebecca Schoepfer. Hello, Rebecca, CHRO friend from TruGreen. I am really excited to have a great conversation with you today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Best Wednesday ever.
Excellent, excellent. And as you keep reminding me, being in Florida, you have a warmer climate than almost everybody. So I hope you're enjoying that while some of our listeners are facing ice, sleet, and snow. But I think it's apropos that we're talking to TruGreen and the CHRO in Florida, because it just seems like it's always green there. So I'm really excited to talk with you. And today our topic is talking about the big trends in 2023. And Rebecca and I have been back and forth talking about these for several weeks. And we're seeing some trends that we believe are making the largest difference inside kind of the world of work, but specifically around talent. And as you know, Phenom, our purpose, our sole purpose in existing is supporting people like Rebecca and her team to bring 1 billion people and get them the right job. So we're excited to talk to people that are passionate about talent, that are experts in talent, and have a perspective that I think has a ton of value for the people that are listening today. So the goal is that you're able to take 2 or 3 really fundamental ideas today, maybe some tips and tricks, and be able to take those and apply those to your business so that you can be more successful helping people find that right job with you. So I'm really excited to talk about our trends this year. We've got 5 trends over the next 40 or so minutes that we're going to be discussing. And this, as you know, if you've been to the webinar before, this is really an open dialogue between Rebecca and I, but certainly we're going to entertain questions at the end. And if you want to, you can actually put those questions into the chat, and I'll be able to bring those up. I may even bring some up real time with Rebecca so that we can deal with them at the moment that they come in. So feel free to engage. We're looking forward to having you participate. So with that said, Rebecca, tell us a little bit about yourself. How you got into the world of people, what makes you passionate to show up every day and help your company grow and be successful.
Yeah, thanks. So I always joke that I'm probably the least HR person you've ever met, and probably because I started my career in psychology and realized that I didn't like working with people, so I got into HR. But essentially, jokes aside, for me, it's really all about making a business successful and people being a lever to do that. And I've really loved working for companies that value that, like TruGreen.
Yeah, no, I totally get that with you, and it actually brings us to our first trend. We're just going to jump in right into the deep end, and the trend that we're talking about and that we've been discussing. And actually, I wrote an article for Fast Company and talked about the fact that HR goals and business goals are a big trend that we need to keep front and center, especially at the C-suite level in HR. But this idea that business goals and HR goals, there used to be kind of a sense that there was kind of this wall between the two of them where, hey, you HR people do what you need to do, and then we'll go do business. And I love the fact that you clearly have never had that wall in your mindset. And talk to us a little bit about why you think that's such an important trend this year, as far as keeping hyper focused on making sure that HR data is relevant at the C-suite and at that board level.
Yeah, thank you. I think probably every HR leader's worst nightmare is to be known as the party planner or people pleaser. And I think the biggest way to do that and differentiate yourself is to make sure that you can talk in the language of the business, which is often data and money. And for me, I get comments like, wow, Rebecca, you're the first HR person who speaks data. And typically what I say back is, I'm sorry. And the reason why is because I can count stuff just like anyone else. You may be counting dollars. I'm counting applicants. You may be counting, ROI, and I'm counting characteristics to help predict trends, to help us keep higher, whatever it is related to people. And even in our business, which obviously has a major marketing component to generate consumer interest, I say to them, a talent acquisition funnel is no different than a customer acquisition funnel. The digital consumer marketplace is no different than the digital talent marketplace. And so as long as you can create those connections, I think it works.
Yeah. So tell our listeners a little bit about TruGreen and what the kind of core business that you have, because that walks us into some of those big metrics that you in talent need to deliver for the benefit of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So TruGreen, we're in the business of making grass grow, not cutting lawns. So we will make your grass green and healthy. We'll do the same for your trees and shrubs. And close to my own heart, being in Florida, is obviously our mosquito business, where I always say, please don't hold back. And so for us, those key lines of business have a few different elements. One is we are a geographically distributed branch-based business with a large hourly population. Those hourly populations tend to be split into three primary groups. The first one being our sales engine, and there are different ways we go about that, of course, a diversification of sales channels with our associates managing those. Then we have our folks who go out on the lawns, who work with your trees, who help control the mosquitoes, which, is always my favorite. And then, of course, we have our customer care organization. If people have any questions, concerns, all of the, positive comments they want to share about their specialists. So those three big groups. But the thing that makes our business really unique is the cyclical nature of the business. So Jess mentioned I live in Florida, and apparently it's winter, supposedly in other places in the country. But obviously we're not out on your lawn today if you're somewhere chilly. And so our workforce ramps considerably. We go from, let's say, 3,000 folks to 15,000 folks in about a 2-month period of time. So I always joke that the head of talent acquisition for me is the person that I try to keep the happiest.
Yeah, no, I think that's the frame, right? Because this idea, and I think TruGreen found such a special CHRO because those are literally true business needs. Like missing the mark on hiring those people literally means that you cannot show up to a lawn. And I can relate to that as a past CHRO at Lifetime Fitness. The Healthy Way of Life company, we had the same thing. You and I talked about that, right? Finding 9,000 seasonal workers between May and August and trying to hire them before May so we could open up our outdoor pools, make sure people had smoothies delivered by the poolside with our outdoor bistros. And then our child summer camps was massive because people have to be trained up as well, as you and I talked about, not only at Lifetime, but at TruGreen, to make sure that they know how to do what they're doing. And so I think this idea of, I love the parallel that you have between, you might count numbers in dollars, I count talent or personality kind of traits inside of assessments, but they are so correlative. And I think that's one of the big nuggets to take out of this. HR goals are business goals today, because I do sense when I talk to HR people all over the country. I was in Atlanta this last year, and what I saw in a group of about 95 practitioners, right? We're talking about directors of talent and HR business generalists. They are so fatigued because they struggle to translate their need and what they're doing into business language. And because of that, they have some difficulty breaking through barriers inside their own organization, let alone meeting the need of the business. And so that's an interesting philosophy that I would imagine you trickle down through your whole org based on how you demand the rigor of the data coming through. And I would imagine using a platform like Phenom is an important piece to be able to truly see where that talent is, how you're going to get it, how you're going to maintain relationships with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I'm very fortunate that my team trickles data up to me. So I think that's kind of embedded within our organization to a certain extent. We are a finance-driven organization. And so if you're going to compete as an HR function for share of voice at the business table, you have to bring just as compelling facts and figures, which are data-driven metrics. And what I always find is that when people come and question you, it's really easy to get into an argument of emotion or gut. It's really hard to get into an argument about data. So oftentimes that's the way to just kind of say, here's where we are, and that's that.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's a great principle. I knew this was a good one to start with because it's a big umbrella across every other trend that we're talking about today. And I think that's the other encouragement for those practitioners. If you aren't or haven't had the history of being super data and numbers centric, it's really hard to argue about the numbers. And especially when it's so directly correlative to the success of the business. And it brings us to the other piece of that trend, which is this idea of nuke nostalgia. And being an HR practitioner, I think you and I have been doing this about as long as each other. This idea of getting up on the balcony of your own business and challenging the way that you've typically done it, so that you can think about doing it a different way. I think that's a really important challenge and a trend that is going to persist, because we've had to do that with the headwinds we've faced over the last couple of years for sure. But I think that's going to persist even as long. Like, for instance, I just talked to an organization that has revamped their whole group in HR. You talked about it. It's really sales and marketing. That's what talent acquisition is. They actually now have a talent marketing manager, and they were having a hard time recruiting for that because they wanted an internal person, and people could not get through their head that HR needed a marketing manager. So trying to sell the organization on that, or even a marketing manager to come from their sales and marketing team into that role, was a nuke nostalgia element where they had to change belief inside their org. I would imagine you actually, I know, have done some innovation. Talk to us a little bit about what your thoughts are around just nuking the norm and saying, hey, we're going to do something different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just goes back to what I said before about being focused on where are you getting your talent from. So one of the things for me that I talk about when I say where are we competing for talent, when we're benchmarking jobs, when we're setting wages, is I'm not competing for talent with other lawn care companies. I'm competing for talent against Amazon warehouses. I'm competing for talent against fast food, the malls, any retail. Those are my competitors. So if I'm doing wage benchmarking, I'm not looking at a lawn production specialist, if, God help me if I can find that, but I'm certainly not doing that. I'm looking against the places where people are benchmarking me. And so that, outside in philosophy is something that I think we need to do more of.
Yeah, I know that is such a great example. I've had several conversations this last year around that, where people are like, well, my CEO is saying that, just go and find the fitness club down the street no, it's literally the people right next door that you're competing with, and you need to have a broader idea and be able to bring that data to bear. So the first trend in 2023 is HR goals or business goals, and we need to think a little differently to make HR matter and make sure that data is number centric, can be verified, and it's consistent to make sure that your teams that have the time, talent, and treasure to be able to be budgeted to be able to help you win is there. And then thinking different. How do you solve the problem from a different lens is a big trend for us, which takes us into trend number 2. This has been a persistent one, but I think it's worth talking about. Is we have an activated talent population for a lot of reasons. And you can see some of the bullet points, but we have a lot of people that know that they have optionality. And I think that's going to persist is I can start at this job and get another job very quickly, or I can get 2 jobs, decide which one I want to start and never go to the first job that I got. So we know that we have an activated population that way. We also know that Gen Z is coming in force to our workforce. And I think some HR practitioners can look at that negatively. And I say, hey, these are the people we're going to be working with. We should look at all of the positive attributes there. And so I'm pretty optimistic about Gen Z. But more than that, this idea of we have to make sure that we're in some senses, and you might want to reframe it a different way, Rebecca, but we're selling the job at TruGreen or another place, even at Phenom, right? Knowledge workers, skill workers, it doesn't matter. We are selling the idea of working for our organization and trying to make that compelling. Is that a fair statement that we have to look at and have that muscle really developed inside of our world of HR and talent?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you and I have talked about some of the differences in our workforces. So we are a company where 90% of our workforce is going to a brick and mortar place, and then they're going out to people's homes. That is fundamentally different than other jobs where remote work is a possibility. We can't go make your grass green from home. Right. So there is some element to these jobs that we have to combat against when I'm doing remote call centers versus our call centers are brick and mortar. So we have some different challenges from a workforce perspective, but essentially the way I boil it down, so, you know, the running joke here, you can tell I have a reasonable sense of humor. If you are going to correlate your HR data into business metrics, if you're going to talk about your consumers as being applicants, I think it's apropos to talk about the talent acquisition and talent lifecycle in a real estate analogy, right? So you have a buyer's market, you have a seller's market. Right now, from a TA perspective, we are very much in a buyer's market. You can see that through wage inflation. You can see that through show rates dropping like crazy. You can see that through the scarcity of talent. I think the latest data said that there are 2 to 3 people for every 1 open job. And I think that's Bureau of Labor Statistics. So it's just, there aren't enough bodies to go around. It's an absolute buyer's market, just like in real estate. When there's scarcity, we go to the buyers. And so when it's a buyer's market, what it comes down to is 2 things. One is speed to market. How quickly can I get an offer into someone's hands, and can I do it faster than other folks? And can that offer be reasonably competitive to our benchmarked, you know, companies for that talent pool? So speed becomes absolutely critical. But the second piece of that is, how do you educate people on what it is that they're actually accepting? Because the last thing you want to do is make an offer super quick. They actually come and show up and they start, and then they get there and they're like, wait a minute, this is not what you told me or not what I expected. And so we do a ton of work in partnership with Phenom, funny enough, that enables us to put videos in front of applicants that says, like, here's what it is to go out on the lawn. Here's what it is to be a door-to-door neighborhood sales representative for TruGreen, because some of the jobs are really hard to understand.
Yeah.
We don't want to put all the energy to have you come and hate it.
Yeah. You know, I think that's the front end and the back end, right? I've talked to so many people that are trying to convince people to work rather than actually giving them that life experience and lived experience of someone in that trench doing that job. And I think it's also a misnomer as I look at so much of the data and the writing at the high level, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times and whatnot. They're talking about, you know, hybrid work and work from home and all of those things. And that's a small fraction of the total work population in the country. And so I do think that it's really valuable to have a voice like yours on a webinar like this, to be able to validate and understand that we're talking about a very small fragment of the population comparatively to most people have to show up, be front and center in front of a customer and deliver that service. And that's a really important thing, I think, for us to think about when activated talent holds the power. I love your idea, your trends too, right? You're seeing all the data and feeling it the same way. Wage inflation, show rates, scarcity of talent. It was interesting. I just saw some data that I thought was really intriguing, that not only are we having less people in the workforce, but there's some reasons why people have just left and stopped looking. You know, I saw a stat that said 7 million males between the age of 25 and 54 have just stepped out of the workforce right now and are not engaged. And so finding ways to engage populations and giving them an option to find out, A, you can come in, B, you can have a great job, C, you can make a real difference and feel valid and valuable, I think is an important part of that storyline around this group of saying, show me what you got for me. Yeah. And then telling the truth so that when they show up, it actually is happening.
Yeah, and being part of a team makes you want to stick around.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
I think that's the other piece of it. There has to be elements around. I can see I'm making a difference for a customer, but I also feel part of something bigger than myself, whether it's the company or the team, because then that's what makes work fun.
Yeah, you know, so talk a little bit about that, because I think one of the things about your career site with the videos, and I think they're reality based. I think that when you go in and you look at a specific job, it helps. You have a personalized experience, and that's part of the kind of AI empowered platform. We're going to talk about AI a little later. AI empowered platform that Phenom offers you, so that you talked about speed to offer. You talked about clarity of the work and what the work really is. And you know that you have places in the job when someone starts, there are parts of the job that they'll fall off. But if you can get them to stay longer, they'll stay long term. So talk to us a little bit about the power of being able to personalize and qualify someone to say, hey, you're a good fit for this job. Is that helping you win? Are you seeing your hit ratio on total talent coming into TruGreen, and then total number of those talented people actually stepping through into apply? Is that working for you?
Yeah, I think what we've really been focused on is how do we create that brand awareness more holistically out in the marketplace. I mean, our philosophy, along with many others, should never be Indeed and pray, right? Like the post and pray. I
right,
it's Indeed and pray. Right. So it should never be that. So how do you become a place, a destination where people want to go? And then once they're there, it's like super easy to make it through, because your application process is talking to an applicant before you ever get an opportunity to. So if it's really hard to work through it, they're going to assume it's really hard to work for you. If it's really fast and easy to work through it, they're going to say, hey, you know, this might be a place for me.
Yeah. There's a question that came up specifically to you in the chat, and this might be a good place because you're talking about the actual outcome of that first trend, which is HR business needs and business goals are HR goals are business goals. So there's a question that here says, "What's your advice to CHROs who may not have, if they struggle to create a data-driven case for an AI platform in front of their C-suite? How have you had success? Like, what's the thought process, or who's on your team that helps you do that?"
Yeah, I think when people think about data-driven business cases, they're trying to think of like, okay, what are all of the data elements that I can use? And I tend to take a different approach, which is find the one. Because if you throw a bunch of things out there, how do you know what really worked? And if only some of them work and some of them didn't, is it a success or is it not, right? Pick the one. If I'm picking a learning program, I'm not going down the line to business outcomes. I'm going to seat time, right? Seat time costs money. So I can get a real financial impact if I can reduce seat time. If I can get people to stick around more, meaning I'm generating a return on the wage, that could be a potential metric. But just pick one. And then when you pick the one, you have we just revamped our training for our lawn specialists and we cut it down by a whole day. And we can say that day savings should generate this astronomical number. Great. But really, just to break even on the training time commitment, I only need to save 2 hours, not 8. So I'm not committing to you 8. I'm committing to you, I'll give you the 2. Everything else is gravy, right? Yep. So pick your one metric and then give them your break even. And if there's above that, then great.
I think we could probably end the webinar right there. Like that is master level. It's master level ways of thinking. I think we overcomplicate our business because the numbers are so often new in HR. We overcomplicate it. That's a great, incredible insight. And I think inside of this marketplace where we're going to continue to have pressure in some of these areas, finding really efficient ways to save so you can actually apply those savings maybe even to wage or to quality of job or to perks or those types of things, I think are really important. It's just not more money on the money tree. There has to be ways to be able to actually kind of go from right hand to left hand to make this whole entire talent brand and talent promise work inside of organizations so we can continue to do the service that we provide. So I think that's a fantastic way of connecting those two first big trends. The third trend, and again, I always like to say when I think about this trend, diversity, equity, and inclusion, don't think about trend as something here today, gone tomorrow. We're talking, and you can see this already by the first two, these are long-term, sustainable trends that we need to get on and focus and make sure that we continue to focus front and center long-term. We've had some good conversations about this, and I think diversity, equity, inclusion is a key business strategy. What we know is more diversity bonus is real. The more diverse groups that you have working together, the better the problem solution equation happens. And obviously, you open up the paradigm of job and opportunity and talent in a significant way. Talk to me a little bit about why this is a big trend that you and I agree that we talk about, and your perspective on it.
Yeah. I think you're going to find a similar theme here for me, which is that DE&I critically important to a business. For us, it's part of our ESG strategy that we report out to our board on a regular basis. So beyond the fact that it's important to us as a business because, it's the right thing to do, it also happens to be something we're held accountable for. Funny enough, not the other way around. Yeah. And so I think that for us, where you get to DE&I and you're like, oh, this is huge, it's massive, there's so much to do here, it can feel really overwhelming and you can get stuck. And so I would say the same thing about a data-driven business case when it comes to DE&I. Find the bottlenecks, find the places where you're stuck. For TruGreen, it happens to be how do we promote diversity into frontline leadership and how do we promote diversity in our executive level positions. Those are the two areas where we are most stuck right now. So when you look at our talent practices, whether it's looking for external talent to bring into the organization, our succession planning and identification of high potential talent and putting them into internal movement opportunities, all of those are focused on just those two areas. Not to say I'm not going to take a win for something else, absolutely, but I just need to focus on those places where I'm stuck today. And if we can unblock them, I am certain there are two more places behind that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a wise piece. I think the fatigue that can come even with, in organizations, we have a lot of directors and vice presidents and heads of DE&I. And I think that can be a job that can feel so chaotic and so broad and wide that to narrow it down and take on the first blockers first and then win there and continue to take on that territory, I think is a critical piece, even just for the idea of making this a long-term endeavor, right? This is not just come in, figure out, and move on. This is a long-term commitment to an organization. I love that idea. Talk to me, one of the bullet points on the slide is empowering and continuing to increase people's awareness, especially at the leadership level, so that they're not almost in some senses creating their own barriers to entry based on their interactions, how they understand DE&I. What's your perspective? Are leaders getting in the way, or are leaders becoming more and more aware that they profoundly impact that not only that feeling, and feeling is a big part of this, but also the metrics and the success of some of these blockers that you're talking about?
So I think that people can generally recognize the criticality of it, if for no other reason. If I just go on the basis of this, we had a huge Hogan personality initiative the last year, right? So you learn a lot of things about yourself, about your peers, things like that. And I always go down to okay, who has similar profiles to you, right? Who has similar personality? You don't need a Hogan to do it. I mean, goodness gracious, we do it in our personal lives all the time, sure. Right? Yeah. And I say, those people who have similar profiles to you, those people will be your best friends. You will love having lunch with them. The people whose profiles that are fundamentally completely different to you, those are the people you want to ask your ideas and vet your plans, because they're going to give you the best feedback and identify your blind spots. And at the end of the day, that's what DE&I is all about, right?
Well said. I think that's a clear and critical trend in 2023. We need to keep front and center. It's something I'm talking about as often as I can, and I appreciate that perspective, because in a marketplace where you are in a bit of a buyer's market, right, and you have an opportunity to be able to break in and make your organization more equitable, more desirable for anybody and everybody where the job fits. Is a critical piece. And part of that is the story that you tell. We've already talked a little bit about this, but this takes us to our fourth trend, which is brand reputation and lifestyle contract is a really important part of what we're doing. And what we know then is we've already talked about, the Phenom empowered career site that you have that allows you to personalize the job journey, right? The career opportunity journey for each individual that comes in to find where they, from a geographic standpoint, from a job fit standpoint, from even the proximity to their home. All of those pieces are a part of that, but it's all happening real time without people having to put in a lot of information based on how your platform works. But before you can have all of those great tools, an AI-empowered chatbot, all of those things, you need to have a brand point of view. Like, who are you? And you talked about this earlier, just a little bit around your purpose, why you exist, and why you're going to engage people to say, I can see myself being at TruGreen long-term. How important has brand reputation and really, promising people a certain job and then fulfilling on that promise when they actually start? How important has that become comparatively to other years in the last couple of years with the marketplace that we're facing?
Yeah, I would say there's about 8 million different answers percolating in my head. So I'll try to, get it down to the critical few here. The first one is, if you just go on the rising costs in the digital talent acquisition marketplace, it's the same thing for the digital consumer marketplace. We're all competing with those rising costs of promoting jobs, of posting jobs, of all of those pieces. And so the goal is to get people to, for lack of a better way to say it, buy direct. And that means that you have to be known and have a name in the marketplace. And Phenom has been great helping us optimize our process, but they have to be able to get to us.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
And so that buy direct essentially comes down to, how are you known in the marketplace? How are you known internally so that you can get that word of mouth from your existing employees? By the way, that's called culture. And how are you known externally in terms of your brand reputation? And my shtick on this is, it goes like this. If you think you don't have an employer brand, you're wrong. If you say nothing, you're saying something, and you're letting your employer brand manage you. So what is it that you want your employer brand to be? And then own it. Because if you're saying nothing, you're still saying something. My kids hate that, but it's the truth. And I have this running theory, one woman's opinion, that in the absence of an employer brand, I can tell you exactly what your employer brand is, which is this. The business that you're in is often how you treat your people. And I gave this to Jess, and I don't know if you've thought about it since we talked about it.
But I have. I was going to bring this up if you didn't bring it up today, because I think it's just an absolutely great just balance. Like, quickly, you can say, what is this place all about?
Oh, totally. So if you think about the business that you're in is how you treat people. So let's take Amazon. Amazon is all about a dog eat dog consumer marketplace, right? You get thrown in as a vendor, you sink or swim on your own. That's it. What is their culture known as? It's known as a highly competitive dog eat dog culture. Some people are highly successful in it. Some people are not.
Not a bad or good thing. It just is. So let's be true about that, and then allow people to come in and succeed in that environment.
Totally. And there's someone for everyone. There's a culture for everyone too. If you take Walmart, for example, so they're in the consumer product industry where when one thing pops off a shelf, another one pops up behind it, right? And so it's about commoditization of products. If you think about it, it's kind of how they treat their people to a certain extent, right? How do I get it at the lowest cost?
Yep.
If you take any tech company, you want Google, you want Facebook, whatever it is, at the end of the day, it's all about flash to a consumer, right? And so what do? You get great perks, you get ping pong, you get dry cleaning, you get snack bars, whatever it is. But there is a flip side to that, which is technology is always on, right? So they're giving you those things because of the hours that you're required to work. So whatever business you're in tends to be the way in which you treat people. And if there is a huge disconnect between those two things, it makes a CHRO's job that much harder.
That's right.
But if you're not speaking, your consumer brand is doing it for you.
All right. There's another drop the mic. We could end the webinar right there. We got one more trend that we're going to go through. I have actually wrestled with that now for the last couple of weeks since we got talked. And I actually had a couple of my people on my team bring that up as well. And again, I think it's so important too, because your culture is your culture, but you need to make sure that you're building it with intention is what I hear. So that's the big thing. How do you move to the trend and make sure that the trend's not defining you, but you're defining the trend.
Absolutely.
And this, if you have not done a really good job of building the psychological contract between you and your team and be authentically pragmatic about what your company's all about and figuring out the purpose around what you're doing, not only the purpose of growing your business and, better bottom line, but truly why you exist in a more kind of, I think, thoughtful and almost existential way. I think this Gen Z is going to look at you and go, even though you might be close to home or you're paying a decent wage, I don't believe in what you're all about. And I think that's an important thing that we need to see, because I think see and address, because I think it's going to be something that's going to be persistent. So there's another question in the chat that says, I've heard this cyclical buyer's market, seller's market several different times, Rebecca. I love the real estate analogy. When do you think we're going to see a switch from the buyer's market to the seller's market? And what signs are you looking for? And I think this fits really here. What are the signs you're looking for when the headwinds maybe change a bit?
So it's really no different than real estate. It just comes down to simple supply and demand. And if you look at what got us to this buyer's market, right, it was the number of people applying to jobs or available to work as compared to the number of jobs that are out there. One of the things that I keep watching is the organizations that are downsizing, right? So how far and wide is it? What types of jobs is it? Because just because organizations are downsizing doesn't mean that it's going to have a material impact on the types of jobs that I'm looking for.
That's right. Yep.
So paying attention to the industry and those trends. So job availability, talent availability for the types of workers that I need is one. Just like you're looking for a house in your price point in a specific neighborhood with certain characteristics. It's no different. And there may be a lot of houses on the market, but I might not be able to afford them. And so it's the same thing. But the second piece is how we got where we are is wage inflation. So wages just shot up like crazy. And so that is starting to ease a little bit. So we were even talking about 3 months ago what wage budgets looked like as compared to what they look like right now. And they are totally different based on business performance over the past just few months. And so as we're starting to see that ease, we might be starting to see a little bit of a flip, or at least a softening of the buyer's market, if not a total 180.
Yeah, it's almost the inverse of what you're talking about. Wage inflation, show rates, scarcity of talent. It's the inverse of that, and I think those are the trends that we need to watch. And I was with a client last week in a strategy session, and they're in a very competitive market. It's going to stay that way for a long time, but they're already starting to see some of those disproportionate wage increases starting to soften just a little bit, and they're getting into a place where I think more profitability and sustainability is something they're seeing in the forecast. So I think you're right. I also think, I love the idea of the tides coming in, tides coming out. That's another analogy, not to confuse things. But I actually heard a Gartner researcher talk about employment brand and how be very cautious, though, when this market comes back, right? When it becomes a seller's market again, understand that the actual marketplace has changed fundamentally forever. Don't think you can just go all the way back to what used to be pre-pandemic, early 2000s. There's going to be some things that are going to be super important to keep investing in HR as well. And we talked about some of those today, right? Employment brand is still going to be really important, making sure that you're very specific on how you're finding your talent and being really efficient, not just posting and praying and putting something on Indeed. There's going to be some things that momentum needs to keep moving forward. In fact, the analogy of the tide coming in and out, if you've been in this business long enough, you know that it goes into a empowered employment population to a more empowered, employer population. I think, though, what their data is showing is the tide's going to come out, but the shoreline is fundamentally going to be changed forever. The tide came in really hard, and we're going to see some of those things persist. And that's an okay thing, too. A perspective on that, would you say that, yeah, that probably a little bit true?
I think it's a little bit true, but I think there's a piece on this that I guess I would say I struggle with, that I don't think that there's an answer to, which is, will we ever go back to a pre-pandemic way of work life? And I do struggle, whether it's talent acquisition, whether it's employee experience, because if you look at your regular life, the vast majority of it has gone back, whether it's travel, movies, eating out. My kids are back in school 5 days a week, thank goodness. So they're not on hybrid anything, but yet as an employee experience, maybe there's expectations around hybrid experience, but at the same time, I have jobs that won't allow it. Yeah. So I think there's some pieces around this that I just don't think we have the answers to yet.
Yep. I was hoping you were going to get there, because I think it's important, again, for us to address a majority of the population needs to be front and center and facing a consumer. And that's where the economy works, right? Mm-hmm. We're interacting with each other. We're taking care of pieces because we're experts in this marketplace. And I do think that that's something that we need to talk about in a broader context inside the world of CHROs. Is it's not about the office worker. It is about work in general and the employment population, and making sure that we're fundamentally giving people the opportunity to do that the best way possible, I think, is really important. So thank you for making that point again. I think it's so critical for our listeners today. We have a pretty activated listening population here today. So we might have to make this a regular thing, Rebecca. So the last trend, I know we're getting to time, is AI and people. This is trend number 5. And if you've been on anything social media, you've heard about ChatGPT and all these other chat tools or AI empowered tools that allow you to do X, Y, and Z. That's kind of almost, I look at that as almost a veneer of what AI is all about. You and I have talked more deeply around how AI is impacting us in real fundamental ways. But let's talk about, the fact that, we believe that we have moved in, and we have moved into an AI empowered world. Obviously, Phenom, I believe, has some real powerful kind of end-to-end platform, AI empowered. And so we're dealing with not only the strategy around that and the engineering of that, but also the ethics of that. That is something that's front and center for organizations that are using this. Talk to me a little bit about your idea around how do you do it well? How do you make sure it's fair and balanced all the way back to DE&I? Give us your thoughts.
Sure. So for me, AI is one of those yikes, this is pretty scary. I like to drive my 15-year-old insane by calling it the TikTok. Are you on the TikTok again? And at which point he's like, oh God, please don't say that. So, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to AI, we could say in an HR, from an HR lens, that could be pretty scary too. And my things back to you would be, how many of you have a chat bot? If you're here because you're a Phenom client, chances are most of you, that's just a version of AI. How many of you are posting jobs on Facebook? How many of you are posting jobs on different platforms? That's a version of AI. You're letting the technology work for you, give you back data to help adjust and streamline some of your plans. I mean, that at the end of the day is what AI is all about. And so for us, I think we're lucky. This is not a sweet spot for me. I think probably the other trends would have been better areas for me. And at the end of the day, I would say when it comes to AI, if it makes you nervous or you want to joke about the TikTok, just make sure you have a great vendor partner.
Yeah, I think that's it. Before I came to Phenom, I was the CHRO at Lifetime, and I really learned how to actually work with Phenom to the point where they moved from vendor to partner. And they became a trusted resource where I could really pressure test the things that were out of my field, right? That was some deep waters, bringing in people that have a lot of insight and background in it is critical. And we do that in so many different ways, right? We hire consultancies to help us with payroll or pay and wage. And so we need to think about it that way. I think you've said that Incredibly well. It's here. We also know that 70% of HR professionals believe that AI is actually helping and improving the experience for them and for the people that they serve. When it comes down to for us, I think about it always as it's quantity, but not giving up quality. And you have to do it at speed to be able to compete in this marketplace. Those are things that an AI empowered people in manned opportunity really help you do, right? It's both and, but without AI, you're still back in the Stone Age working with stone tools trying to chip away at the rock, and it's just not as effective as it needs to be. So I think that's well said, finding that great partner that you can rely on so you can actually spend all the time you need to spend with all the big things that were happening before. I have one question as we move into kind of our final set to review these 5 trends. This is a great question for you, Rebecca, is what are the 2 big things you'd like to accomplish this year and why?
Sorry, as I dropped my computer. So obviously this is a great question because I got so excited I dropped my computer. But, I would say for me, the 2 biggest things this year are around talent stickiness. I think it's one thing to be able to find folks for your jobs, to be able to get them through your processes and get them to show up on day 1. But how do you get them to show up on day 2, day 30, day 90? Our data shows that if we can get people past day 90, they tend to stick around an average of 2 years. But we're losing, I lose 5 people for every 1 person I can get to that 90 days. So how are we making sure that we are thoughtful about every touch point across the employee life cycle? And what are the reasons why people might leave? So I have a theory that anyone who leaves in under 7 days was a bad hire. So what have I done in my talent acquisition process? How am I holding recruiters accountable? Anyone who leaves in under 14 days, it was a bad training experience. I didn't prepare them for the job, or I didn't educate them about the job earlier. So what am I doing there? If it's 60 days, it's probably a manager issue or a job fit issue. So there are just so many things that you can hit along the way to help get to that stickiness. It's not just a one size fits all. And when we talk about employee experience, I think it just comes down to pulling the levers of staffing, stickiness, and then long-term retention. And for me, it's those last 2 that are probably the biggest focus areas for the year.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think it puts a big exclamation point on what you're talking about is we really need to address the fact that many people have to show up for work every day, and they have to go out and they have to pull hoses from the back of trucks. They have to, serve and take care of people front and center. And we need to make sure that we are addressing that and taking care of that as HR professionals. So I appreciate that a lot. So as we kind of close things out here, Rebecca, we have these 5 trends, and we'll put those up again. Here's the 5 trends: diversity, equity, inclusion. Activated talent will hold the power. HR goals are business goals. Nuke the nostalgia. Think differently. Brand reputation and the lifestyle contract and how you not only promise something but fulfill it is something that's going to be critical in 2023. And AI and people find great partners that can help you make sure you're doing it well and with efficacy for everybody included. And you can actually thrive inside of that quality, quantity, and speed marketplace. I really appreciate the time, Rebecca. And I want to just tell our listeners, did you enjoy Rebecca's point of view? Did you love the fast pace and just that amazing intellect kind of thinking about the people business? If you did, and you'd like to hear her speak again, she's actually going to be a keynote speaker at an annual conference at Phenom called I Am Phenom. You can go to IamPhenom.com, but it's March 28th through the 30th in the great city of Philadelphia. I would really encourage you to take a look at your calendar, hold that place. Rebecca, you're going to have a great opportunity to stand on stage and tell a story. I think it's going to be fantastic. So thank you for your time today. It's a gift. I know you've got a million things going on in your business, and being able to actually contribute to the greater good of the world of HR and people is just such an amazing gift of servanthood to your other peers. So I appreciate you coming. Any last thoughts before we end today from you?
No, thank you so much. You've promised me that it's going to be warm in Philadelphia at the end of March, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So everyone will have that to look forward to if they weren't looking forward to anything more from me.
Yeah, because we're going to run the Rocky Steps together. So it's got to be warm enough to do that.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll let you get on with your day, but really do appreciate it. Just an absolute gift today. And I know you've made the day and given people those 1 or 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 big nuggets to take away today. I really appreciate that. So you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see everyone on the next webinar about CHROs and the business of talent.